just tell us what happened to you in Diaz.
Well, we were staying at the school Diaz, which was under renovation at the time. We had spent about, I remember we had a very lengthy discussion about where was the safest place to sleep in Genoa, or whether we should leave that night. We decided it was probably safer to stay, and as a consequence, 2 hours later, we heard shouts, looked out the window, and saw about 60 police in helmets and body armour charging into the school gates. At that point, we hastily dressed, grabbed our passports and hid under a table. We spent some time lying under tables, hearing shouts and screams and thuds and bangs as everybody else in the building got beaten up. And then they began bashing the door down. The police burst in. About 3 police came to me. There were probably 8 or 10 police altogether. Some went to Dan and Norman, who were also in the room, 2 English guys. And I lay there on the floor trying to protect myself with the chair, and eventually decided, well, this was a waste of time. I'm going to get beaten up, so I might as well get it over and done with. Handed the chair to them and promptly had 3 police stand over me with batons, taking blows at me all down my left-hand side of my body, and I took 3 blows to my head. After that, we were marched downstairs and saw the remains of everybody else. There was about 50 people downstairs at that point, some of them in much worse shape than I was. I came off comparatively lightly. Others were unconscious. There was people bleeding. It was just quite an astounding scene downstairs. Eventually some ambulance people arrived, and they looked utterly shocked and then really didn't seem to quite know what to do about it all. And we were there some time and then taken off by police van to Bolzaneto, which I didn't know where we were. I didn't have a clue where we were at the time. I was then searched, I was kicked, I was punched in the kidneys, clouted around the head just as we arrived, and we then were stuck in this concrete cell, which was actually very cold, as I recall, and left there without very much for about 30 hours, with occasionally being taken out and questioned and shoved around and things. We spent the first 2 hours spread eagled against the wall and being kicked if we moved. There didn't seem to be we had no idea what was happening. Really, the worst thing was we had absolutely no idea where we were, what was going on. We were never told what we were charged with, whether we were under arrest. We had no idea what was happening. And we were just being disappeared as far as we could tell. And we were, after about 30 hours there, we were told some of us were being released. We were presented with a whole lot of papers, and if they happened to have our name on it, we were then given that, and I don't know what happened. If you couldn't find one, we were told we were arrested. We weren't told ever what we were charged with, and then we were moved to prison. We had made repeated requests for lawyers, to phone embassies, to phone relatives. We were constantly told that yes, we'd see a lawyer later, and that never happened. And exactly on the point of 5 days, almost to the hour, we were taken before a magistrate, and this was the first time we had any legal representative. We, at that point, as we were shown into the magistrate's office, we were introduced to a lawyer, and at that point I spent perhaps 10 minutes with the magistrate, told them what had happened, and she almost immediately said that there was no charges, we were free to go, and the arrest had been illegal. And we were then released from the prison. We were handed out actually over to the police again, and we were then deported from Italy. We were taken to Milan airport and just left at the airport to buy a ticket home. That was difficult for me since I didn't have a passport and or a wallet, because the police had kept my wallet and passport and hadn't returned it, and it took me 2.5 months, I think, to get that back. So I then found myself, one of my friends had a credit card, so he bought me a ticket back to London, where I was living at the time, and I ended up trying to get through Heathrow without a passport or any identification or any money, which took a bit of fast talking, but eventually I managed to get in. But that was probably the hardest thing of the whole thing, really. I heard a lot of allegations of mistreatment, and certainly there was all sorts of things were happening, but I didn't hear about the use of tear gas. Okay. Actually, I think as a New Zealander I was getting off rather lightly, because they seemed to be treated as a bit of sort of an amusing figure, right. And the police did seem to have very clear ideas at certain nationalities with troublemakers, and that seemed to be the way they were working.